So I have a couple of questions. So first off, are you guys both in New York? Is that where the thing started? Where did you come up with the idea for the podcast first, and then the coaching program later?
So the podcast program started with AJ and Jordan. They were going to school in Michigan.
Okay.
And Ann Arbor, and they started the podcast, and it had taken off. Just due to there wasn't a lot of podcasts back then. This was on, and it was men's focus, and it was on dating, a topic that, of course, guys want to hear about.
What year is this?
Like 2006.
Yeah, so this is a long time. I mean, this is like back around when Joe Rogan gets started.
He was just getting started as well.
Yeah.
And so they started the podcast. It had taken off, and they had started getting requests for coaching. Now, while it was taking off, you have to also remember, and you were talking about working with Mystery. This is 2000, just after 2005. The game had just come out.
Yeah.
Neil Strauss's book, and that was a very popular book. I mean, it was a massively popular book.
Yeah.
And so that book was also on the back of a men's movement craze that was going on in the internet, and we have to think about what the internet is and was back then.
What it was compared to how it is now, yeah.
Right, which is, it was just a bunch of guys working things out, building it at that time.
But also, we couldn't, like, our access to these guys was like videos you'd have to buy and DVDs they'd send to your house, like David D'Angelo, Neil Strauss, or Mystery, not 4K streaming video on, because a lot of people don't remember, we didn't have, it was Google Video before it was YouTube. I have videos back on Google Video. Back in those days, and these were like grainy 320 SD videos, and so mainly you're reading forums. That's where you're getting your own. Most of this stuff is coming from.
Yeah, and there was a groundswell of interest in this community that was bubbling on the internet. And who's going to be on the internet first? Guys working it out, building it.
Yeah.
Right. So what are guys who are working it out, building this thing? What are they going to end up talking about?
Girls, man.
Girls, of course. And what kind of guys are these? These are very analytical software developers. These are guys who are entrenched in computers. So, of course, they want to get information on what is the best way of getting out, meeting girls. They're not out there at the clubs.
Yeah.
They're not building peer groups of massive parties and everything else is going on. They're playing games and building stuff and making stuff work. If it wasn't for those guys, we wouldn't have the internet.
Yeah.
So they're going to be talking about girls. And because there was so much interest in this and information coming out, everyone has a take, everybody has a perspective, and all of this information is flying everywhere. So they started the podcast, and at that time it was called Pickup Podcast.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So now that squares the circle for me, because that was confusing. Because one of the things that was interesting is when the reception for the game, when it came out, you have to understand, Neil Strauss wasn't a pickup writer. This guy was working for Rolling Stone.
Oh, yeah.
And he had written several biographies before that.
I already had The Dirt. I was a huge fan.
The Dirt, I've read Emergency. I've read all of his books.
Yeah.
The thing is with Neil was that the reception was a very typical Hollywood industrial complex. Oh, here's a new idea. Maybe we'll turn this into a book. This is cute. This is like the movie Hitch. And the additional, like the wave of feminist outcrying and misogyny that came later was not part of this.
No.
This was literally seen as almost like a mainstream thing back then. And so it's really interesting that you bring that up. And so you guys do a thing called the Pickup Podcast. And what was the origin for that?
It was, for them, it was just two guys who were interested in this subject, of talking with women and getting better with it and finding this online community and bringing it to the masses through podcasting.
Yeah.
That was it.
Beautiful. And how did that go? Did they have continued growth? Did they get a bunch of guests on there? How did that all work out?
So for them, they put the podcast together and they made some business cards for it, and they started passing them around in Ann Arbor to get some buzz about this thing. And it was all secret. No one knew who they were. They were leaving cards on the urinals of the bars that they were going at in Ann Arbor. They were trying to get more social and getting better with that idea and everything that comes with better communication, persuasion, influence, all these things, and the psychology of it all. And it just so happens that somebody from I can't remember. I think it was Apple Podcasts. Found their card on one of the urinals. Decided to check out the podcast. Was like, this is great. Guys are going to love this. So they put it on the front page of Apple Podcasts. Hockey stick growth right out of the gate. It was a shock to everybody. And so all of a sudden, this thing had legs. And they had a massive audience right out of the gate because this was one of the very first podcasts on psychology, pickup, meeting people, communication. An incredible, interesting topic that I'm still obsessed with to this day at 49. And so as they were looking for more and more people to interview and get more information and find their way into this world that was bubbling underneath of everything, they started getting hit up by guys going, do you guys have a coaching program? Do you have a coaching program? Hey, we love this show. What coaching programs do you guys suggest? And you remember at the time, there was programs kicking off. There was this interest. And Neil's book now has blown up. And that experience for a guy who's spent most of his life playing video games and being on the internet to live in Hollywood in a mansion, running around all these clubs, chasing beautiful models around. What young 20-year-old guy does not think, wow, what a life that would be.
Yeah.
Right? So they're out now trying to figure out, do we send all these guys to a company? So they started taking programs to see which one would work and what would fit and which one did they like and who would their audience like. And as they're doing all these interviews and just checking out what this whole world is like, they had went to a program that was being held in Washington, D.C. Now, this is where I came in. So at this time, just while they're starting this podcast, I'm getting into this world as well. So they were in their early 20s. I was just hitting 30 at the time. And I was a bartender, bar manager, talent buyer. So I lived in this world at the clubs. And that my whole life. In fact, at the time, my apartment was above the club that I worked at. I was there all the time.
Yeah.
Right. And not only I'm there in nightlife, working in nightlife, I'm in the center of the club that I work at and as a connector and as somebody who's always out. And I love bartending and flirting with girls. It was the greatest thing in the world as a young man. It's like, why wouldn't you want to do that? And if you're at the bar every night working, you look for things that entertain you. For me, it was just getting better at flirting with girls and having fun. And my boss at the time had asked me, have you read this book, The Game? Do you know about this pickup thing going on? I'm like, no, this is all brand new to me. He's like, you're going to love it because this is already up your alley. So in reading it and doing a little bit more research, I was like, wow, this is really rad. And I knew who Neil was because I had the dirt. I was a Motley Crue fan. I was playing in bands as well. So it was interesting to me that Neil, who wrote The Dirt and was involved in the Rolling Stone and all this rock and roll from LA, was now into this world and what was going on here. And he wrote this book and this was all brand new. And I found it fascinating.
Yeah.
Some of the ideas I didn't like, some of the ideas I thought were great. And I was like, well, I have a perspective to add to this. I've been working in clubs for the last 10 years and I talk to girls every night. In fact, it's my favorite thing to do. So I got involved, tried to figure out a way to get involved in what was going on because there was this whole scene that just seemed like so much fun at the time. There was a company that was doing some coaching programs out of DC. I had chatted with them on some forums, as you were talking about. Yeah. They had invited me to come up and see what was going on. And I started going up on the weekends and they liked my vibe and what I had to tell the guys that they were working with from just my perspective and from working behind the bar and what was going on. And in working in the bar, not only are you chatting up your customers and everyone who's coming up, but you're also watching what's going on. Because as the bartender or bar manager, how everyone behaves is a top-down situation, hierarchical structure. They're looking for anyone who's in authority and how they're acting, and that's how you're going to cue yourself to behave in that atmosphere. So I had all this perspective on working in that industry that the guys found fascinating and a lot of fun. So they kept inviting me up. For me, it was extra pocket change and an opportunity to go hang out and be in the scene and chat with these young guys. And I really had a lot of fun. I felt like bigger, cooler, older brother who's helping these young guys out.
Yeah.
And I had a blast. And one of those weekends, Jordan and AJ came to review the program that I just happened to be up helping out. We vibed all weekend. We had a great time. And they liked the ideas that I had. And there was a conversation that night over a lot of drinks about what would a coaching program look like if I had my way about it. And I was like, these are the fundamentals that I found that important. These are the things that I'm seeing that these guys are missing. And this is how I would remedy that situation. A few weeks later, it was a call going, hey, do you want to move to New York and start the coaching company to this pickup podcast? And I was like, let's do it.
Yeah.